These schools weren't created because black students wanted separation. They were created because they had no choice. Picture America in 1865. The Civil War has just ended. Nearly 4 million people who were enslaved are suddenly free. Free, but locked out. Locked out of every classroom, every college, every door that led to a future. In many states, it had been a crime to even teach an enslaved person to read. So a question hung over the entire nation. Where would these millions learn to read, to teach, to lead? The answer became the historically black college and university, the HBCU. During Reconstruction, the first ones opened their doors: Howard, Fisk, Morehouse, Hampton. Some were founded by churches and abolitionists. Others were built by freed people themselves, pooling pennies they could barely spare, raising buildings with their own hands. Then in 1890, Congress passed the Second Morrill Act. It forced every state that refused to admit black students into white colleges to build separate ones instead. Not out of generosity, out of pressure. And so a whole network of black colleges rose across the South. Understand what that means. These institutions were born from exclusion. They existed because the door was shut. Then came the long night of segregation. For decades after, the law of the land was separate but equal. In 1896, the Supreme Court made it official in Plessy v. Ferguson. But you already know the truth. Separate was never equal. White schools got the funding. Black schools got the leftovers, the hand-me-down books, the crumbling rooms. And still, inside those underfunded walls, something extraordinary happened. The scholar W.E.B. Du Bois taught that education was the path to full freedom, that a people needed its own thinkers and leaders to rise. HBCUs became exactly that. They trained the teachers who taught black children when no one else would. They trained the doctors who treated black patients when hospitals turned them away. They trained the nurses, the ministers, the engineers. They trained the lawyers who would one day take segregation itself to court. Think about that for a moment. The very system built to keep black Americans down accidentally built the engine that would help lift them up. Where do you think the architects of the civil rights movement were trained? Thurgood Marshall, the lawyer who dismantled school segregation and became the first black Supreme Court justice, was a graduate of Howard University. Martin Luther King Jr. walked the campus of Morehouse College as a teenager. Schools like Spelman opened doors for black women that the rest of the country kept bolted shut. The sit-ins, the marches, the strategy, so much of it was sparked by students and professors on HBCU campuses. These schools didn't just educate, they organized a movement. That is the legacy. But here is where people get it wrong today. They ask, now that the laws have changed, now that any student can attend any school, why do HBCUs still matter? Look at the numbers. HBCUs make up only about 3% of America's colleges. Yet they produce a wildly outsized share of the nation's black professionals, including a large portion of its black doctors, engineers, teachers, and judges. 3% of the schools carrying that much of the weight. And the impact goes deeper than diplomas. A landmark Gallup study found that black graduates of HBCUs were significantly more likely to be thriving, financially and emotionally, than black graduates of other institutions. They were more likely to have had a professor who cared about them, more likely to feel supported, more likely to feel they belonged. That is the quiet thing a number can't fully capture: belonging. The feeling of walking onto a campus where you are the expectation, not the exception, where your history is taught with pride instead of a footnote. There is also the money. A major report from the United Negro College Fund found that HBCUs generate billions of dollars in economic impact every year and support well over 100,000 jobs, often in communities that need them most. These are not relics of the past. They are engines of the present. So why do they still matter? Because the gap they were built to fill never fully closed. Because a place where you are seen changes what you believe you can become. Because the same spirit that pooled pennies in 1865 still hums on those campuses today, in every student who arrives carrying the hopes of a family, and sometimes a whole community, behind them. These schools were never about wanting to be apart. They were about refusing to be left behind. And that is the part most people miss. HBCUs weren't created because Black students wanted separation. They were created because they had no choice. And they remain, by choice, because of everything they have always made possible.